There's free Wi-Fi on this bus. It's a pretty little inlet, if you can see it. It's like a waterway inside these little islands. Beautiful. It's wonderful to kayak in. I think my bus driver did me a favor. Penmon, as you see it, just right on the edge of the map, right where the road in white is on the left side of the map. But I think he's dropped me off somewhere up here further, but I'm not quite sure exactly where. But we're going to hike up to the point here, and then we'll turn around and hike right straight back and down along this road. Whether that's going to bring us right where I am now, I don't know. Okay, looking at the sign, the village is off to our left. I don't think we went through it yet. And we're going to go down towards the point, but en route we should find the Penmon Priory. Penmon was apparently a very important person here back in the 1800s who owned a castle. We may see that later today. I saw big castle remains on the drive up. So anyway, it looks like to me what is a typical day in Wales, and that is, if you're lucky, sun with lots of clouds in the sky. The wind is not much, just a little hint of it earlier. Tremendous wind yesterday. Well, tremendous for what I would desire to have. So we're going to walk to the point, which is out there somewhere, and then we'll walk right straight back. Another typical bucolic Wales scene. Array of pretty white flowers. I don't know if they're wild. They're at the entrance to these properties here. Here, a man or a couple with their little RV. Hope they parked here for the night. It's a lovely place to park. Notice the contrails crossing in the sky. At least 3 planes up there. No, there's a 4th coming. So we must be on a major route somewhere. Since that's the east, they're coming from the west, it looks like. Looks so tall as to be a breakwater as well as a wall for the cattle to the right inside of it. Kind of goose flying in. All of this may be original parts of Mr. Penham's operation, although those 2 houses we just saw are currently occupied, I believe. An old farm building, and I think that 15-mile-per-hour sign may say it all. Interesting old building. Factory, church. There's a sign, we'll go look at that. Gosh, imagine when this was vital and alive to the people who lived and worked in this place. And imagine the times. So we're standing in the cellar of the Priory South Range, which housed domestic arrangements for the Augustinian canons. This cellar was for storage. Canon's dining room, or refectory, was above it, and the dormitory was on still the third floor. Small, intimate place. You wonder how many people it housed. The rectory quite large, really. But the dormitories don't look that large, but if they were dormitories. But why the fortress design? Why the Archimedes firing ports? This refectory was reached from an outside staircase, and a doorway above us led out to the cloister. That doorway led out to the cloister. There was a stairway going up to that exit. Somewhere there is a window, alcove, with a seat in it. It's that, but I can't be sure. But anyway, that's where one of the canons used to sit and read scripture or chants while the others ate. Eating was a very solemn religious experience. It was not a time for joyful camaraderie interaction. Augustinians ate simple food. Red meat was forbidden, but the adjacent fish pond would have provided a nutritious source of protein. This is where we are right now. So the building we looked at before is up in here. See, there's a building beyond this. It was an extension added in the 16th century with fireplaces and latrines, probably private apartments for senior members of the community. A diagram of what it might have looked like. Now this is the extension right here. Interesting that they could imagine that much detail. We'll go look at those fireplaces, because this picture helps us understand what was going on. Now here the refectory is quite modest, just one big table that might have held 8 or 9 people. You can see the entrance, so it'd be up to my left from here. An entrance to the refectory, it looks like. It looks like that was it, but the other window I looked at earlier with the stairs looks more probable. May have served as a pulpit. It's the window, I think, then, that was the seat. It looked like a doorway, and it is slightly larger than these others, but it was apparently a seating. This may just be entrance into the storage area underneath that addition. See the big square hole there for beams that gave support. Whether that was an open doorway or not, doorway, it looks like it might have been. Maybe to another cavity for storage. Here, fireplace. There, fireplace blocked off. A window or a door, don't know. 6th century. St. Seiriol founded an early Welsh monastery here, reorganized in the early 13th century as a priory for the Augustinians, or the Black Canons. St. Seiriol's holy well and circular hermit cell can be reached from the far end of the car park, so we'll go explore that. The bell chamber was remodeled in the 18th century. A fish pond lies behind the path to the well. This is the entrance to the well. So there was a little cavity. Noticed it's almost corbelled ceiling. And there was apparently one above it, But it's unclear here whether that was a cavity or filled in later or not. What those cavities have been for, I don't know. That looks like beams across there. Here are a great number of holes for beams, so it's interesting how this was laid out. Notice the seat, double seat at those windows. Could this have been like a regular doorway where here would be beams that would protect or lock that door in place? And the accompanying cemetery, which you'll notice is very much filled with new tombstones. See many cats here, but it was interesting. He was standing about where I am right now with the fish pond over here, and it sounded like there was a fish jumping, but I think it was these ducks. And you could just see him flick his eye and head when he heard the splash, thinking there might be fish, I suspect. So this, imagine how many centuries these folks that live here pulled fish out of here to eat, to survive on. For all my cynicism with regard to religion, when you look at places like this, you really have to drop back into the history and remember that in the 14th century, 16th century, these were times that were not that far away from the outright anarchy of the Dark Ages, when superstition reigned, because there was no science of appreciable nature, not certainly for the common person. Everybody believed in a God. There was no option, there was no alternative. So imagine that you were the low man on the totem pole here, and it was your job to come and fetch the water, keep the pails and the jugs filled. And what was this little spot for? Something. A tower of some sort, it looks like. Imagine how many people have sat on these benches and the thoughts they had. What we're seeing now, of course, changed over time. Look at the beautiful clear water. At one time, would this have been painted, I wonder? Certainly they would have been filled with little icons in those niches. Would you have said prayers here as you gathered water? We look at flowers today with a certain kind of wonder, mainly because we know we could study them and understand them, but it's almost more pleasurable not to study them, to merely luxuriate in the pleasure that their color and their forms give us. But imagine in the history of this place, when every single thing was a mystery, and a deep mystery. All you had was the surface. You could see the stone and understand nothing about it. This is a Dovecot, whatever that is. Well, this is amazing. I've never seen anything like this. These little cubicles were for the doves, duh. Now, whether the doves could come and go at their leisure, I don't know. Now, what's interesting is they didn't eat red meat, so I assume a dove, being a bird or like a chicken, is considered a non-red meat critter, so they could eat this. And this stone pillar with the steps on the sides was the means by which they gained access to the doves in those little cubicles. Isn't this amazing? I've never seen one. I'll be danged. I won't climb up there, but I wonder if there's anything inside that pillar. Here we've got a picture. See the doves inside. And there are doves outside, so I assume it was a place that they could come and go in. Maybe they got fed here regularly. We'll take a look inside this adjoining building. Lighthouse on our left, and occasionally it's a bell in it that rings. And then you can see the red buoy. I can't see the green one, but red right returning. So in theory, that should be on your right when you're sailing into this huge harbor, actually. And one thing I am interested in, that is when I shoot right over the top of that buoy and look way on the horizon, I see what I think is either oil rigs or windmills. That's what I thought. And they look like they're in the sea. And it might be, considering how shallow we saw this estuary or bay to be when the tide was out. Look at how many there are there in phalanxes of them. That's impressive. That may be the biggest installation of windmills I've ever seen. It's interesting, there are caravanners who apparently can come down and spend the night. There may even be a little restaurant here. I'm not really sure what all these buildings are for. Certainly the lighthouse keeper. Also the coastal path, so we'll follow this back to the fishery and then come back up that road, tie into the road we were at and go down to the Priory and then back down the route we've taken and continue to Beaumaris. I don't know if that on the right is a reflective board for radar that happens to have a painting someone has done of the area. There's our very industrial, probably totally automated lighthouse. You can see from this post there are many, or at least 4 different trail markers, and presumably 4 different trails. What they all mean I don't know, except for the one second from the top, which is the coastal trail. This is the quarry that we could see walking up towards the Priory earlier this morning. Although I have no clue what a huge fortress-like building like that was used for. There's 2 openings at the bottom. This looks like a tailings pile. Maybe all of this was a tailings pile. Here are 2 openings below that massive building. They don't look to have been any deeper than what we see there, but who knows? This massive structure has chutes in it. Obviously, they were for loading wagons or whatever they loaded. And that might have been the pit that was quarried out. So they're only a stone throw away from this quay where ships could have come to pick up whatever he produced here. See a lot of tumbled down large stones which could have been used to make even more of a quay or an area to bring ships in. Here on this side, even more of those chutes and an additional section added on at a later time. That may have been a factory up there. Certainly something using a lot of heat. Whether there was a foundry there that was necessary to the business, I don't know. But these couple of modern buildings, including these latrines, suggest that this operation in some form was in operation recently. Notice that you can just tell where the additions were added. On this lower building here, on the upper building there, on this lower building at this end. Here looking up past the rusted remains of the chute. It's the remains of the mechanism used for raising and lowering a doorway that would have controlled the flow. This is probably the pit from which the stone came, and any of the aggregate that was thrown down those chutes came. This was some of what he shipped. That little notch suggests something took place there. Okay, I'm inside one of those two smaller holes beneath that big fortress-like building, and it looks like these had a couple of chutes in them. So maybe there was a special cart that could be pushed inside of here, filled up with whatever came out of that building, and taken to the wharf. Another look at the Priory and the Dovecot. I've seen that word before in English literature, never had a clue what it meant. Not sure if I've seen this pretty flower before. To correct and clarify my story on that quarry operation over there, they didn't ship from that, what I call the quayside or wharf. Rather, there was a small railroad that would load up not aggregate but blocks of stone. Now if you look at the different sizes of stone we see in buildings, there is a full range. So they probably maximize, like a lumberman would, lumber mill would, every piece they had to get various and get resulting in various dimensions of wood. And then they would ship them along a small gauge railroad along here across the bridge that I must have passed over, but I can't recall where it was, and down to this, which was their dock, and this is where they loaded the stone on. I'm going to shoot down this 1.5 miles of beach, even though I think the tide is coming in, because it looks like down at that bathhouse they get up onto a higher level, and so I'll be okay from there, I think. This is a close-up view of this shoreline and some of the geology. Notice that big boulder that's been rolled down in ancient times. This, a collection of almost mud with a little bit of aggregate in it. The section above it has a lot of small aggregate in it, and it's kind of loose. It's very erodible. I can poke it with my stick. Of course, the section above it is a real loose conglomerate, and that's probably where a lot of this rock comes from. And all I gotta do is make sure I can get around that hump. That should be alright. The gentleman I just spoke to said he thought the tide was going out. And somewhere down there to the right, Beaumaris, or Beaumaris, or Beaumaris, as I think the French would say it. There's where we were this morning. I think we can see the factory there, or the quarry. Hike down here. Last part of the hike I just got off, about 1.5 miles of rock, small rocks along the beach. Probably the hardest hiking there is. Normally you figure hiking uphill is twice as hard as straight hiking. I would peg that at 3 to 4. So now I'm back on the coastal trail, off the beach, off the roads, and now up above that castle I went by today. So hopefully we can go down and take a look at that. It looks like a pretty substantially extant castle here. The outskirts of the castle.
Yeah.
There's a gate there.
No, there's not. Is there actually? Yeah. I couldn't see any like path on that side. But...
Cast iron from the day. Little addition I haven't seen before. Let somebody get out around the corner there. Get additional firing position. Some upper story detail. where the moat was. Or this is part of the moat, I should say. And this was probably a wall in here, as it looks like it was, although it could have been part of the wall of the moat. And there, one of the entrances at least. This is the entrance to the castle, but whether it was the main entrance in that day or not, I don't know. This is my little room for £30, which equates to about $60 US. When I do my exercise, I can just lie down there and do them. There was no other place at the inn. University. This gentleman stopped me and chatted with me, an old fellow with brand new boots. Related an amazing experience. When he was a youngster, I mean very young, like 12, he swam to the United States and ended up in New York. And was adopted by many, many different parents, traveled around quite a bit, went to Canada briefly, had a passport from the President of the United States, eventually was picked up by the police and taken with some others to Alcatraz Island, which happens to be in California, of course. And from there, he and 16 others escaped. And then, somehow getting back to the East Coast, he then found a small boat and managed to get back to the UK. I stopped to look at this old portion of the school. This is the university town. Construction going on. This is a new university building of some sort, but back behind me a ways is some new dormitories, which ironically are right in an area of rather scuzzy looking buildings that are like these row houses we see, but in very tawdry condition, ironically bracketing one of the 3 bed and breakfasts that I'm staying in. This new building is this curious building. It looks like it should be the entry building to a large complex, and perhaps at one time it was.